Thank you everyone for setting some time aside to attend this Navigating Prevailing Wage seminar by Beneco. We will go ahead and get started, and I will introduce Jason and Jenny.
Thank you so much for joining us and taking some time out of your day. We do have a room here with a few in-person attendees. So if you see us kind of talking on this, not necessarily on the side, but having some odd interaction, that is why. And thank you ABC for having us here. We're happy to be here at their lovely office in Bellevue. So just to go over the agenda, we'll start with Beneco, who we are and what we do. We will talk about the Davis-Bacon Act. How does it apply? Who does it apply to in Washington? And then we'll talk about wage determination and fringe dollars. We'll take a short break, and then we will get into the next segment and talk a lot about medical and retirement benefits, certified payroll, and then we will wrap up with Secure 2.0. So who is Beneco? What do we do? We have been in business for about 40 years. We work with clients all over the country, primarily with prevailing wage contractors. In the last 10 years, we've had $700 million in prevailing wage contributions to our benefits programs, which has saved our clients about $125 million in labor burden savings. And because of that, have been able to support 60,000 workers and their families. Just a little bit of background, because of the specialization in what we do, we were actually acquired by a census a few years ago. We fall under their future plan line of business. So just so you guys understand, a census is the largest 401k record keeper for 401k providers in the country. And then Future Plan is the largest third-party administrator for those 401k plans. So it really gives us the backing of a larger company and a lot of additional resources. We're very proud of our partners. Like I said, happy to be here with ABC, but we're part of 12 to 13 chapters across the country. We're also part of Associated General Contractors, NUCA, IEC, and then we also partner with other organizations like Blue Book Network, Paychecks, RPAG, and then for those of you on this call or in this meeting that are familiar with prevailing wage or might be doing prevailing wage, you probably know who LCP Tracker is as well. So what do we offer? At Beneco, we offer solutions to keep you in compliance when you're doing prevailing wage work. So that includes record keeping and third-party administration, as well as benefits consulting services. And then as far as employee benefits go, retirement and pension, and then life insurance benefits, major medical and ancillary, so your dental, your vision, and then HR and compliance services. So while we do provide solutions for you to stay compliant when it comes to these, should I say anything there? Jared, sorry,
What's up?
It says stay muted or unmute.
Stay muted.
Okay, sorry. Anyway, so just able to provide solutions for you to stay compliant, for contractors to stay compliant when they're doing these prevailing wage jobs. And then having benefits in place like this can help to attract new employees and retain your current employees. So before we get on to the next portion of the presentation, just want to spend a minute here looking at this graph. And a lot of what we're going to discuss today has to do with this. So as most of you know, there was a major infrastructure bill that was passed a few years ago, and we're starting to see contractors work on these projects. With the passage of the infrastructure bill, there was $1 billion in additional construction spending that created 3,600 job projects. And because of that, the construction industry needed to attract 550,000 new employees. So obviously there's difficulty for these contractors to find the right employees to do the job because there are so many unfilled positions. But what is nice about Davis-Bacon is there's money within these contracts that do provide solutions for these contractors and benefits for these employees, which is going to give them a competitive edge when it comes to hiring the right people for these jobs. So talk a little bit about Davis-Bacon and what it is and where does it apply in Washington. So the Davis-Bacon law is a federal law requiring all contractors to pay at least the locally prevailing wages on all federally funded projects nationwide. So no matter where you're at, This applies on all federally funded jobs in every state. So in states, if you look at the map here, you'll see states in gray, you'll see states in red. The states in red have only federally funded prevailing wage regulations in place. The gray states do not. So here in Washington, city, state, and county prevailing wage regulations would apply. So Jason and I live in Arizona, where it would be federal prevailing wage regulations only. So for example, if we see a school that's being built or a city building being built, prevailing wage regulations do not apply. Here in Washington, they do. And then a few things to note is the prevailing wage rates will vary based on location and craft. So it's really important to make sure that you're following the correct location, because it can be a pretty significant difference in rate pay. So again, prevailing wage laws apply for federally funded projects in excess of $2,000, regardless of what state you're in. And then in Washington, there is no threshold, so there's no minimum. All city, state, and county funded projects apply. Now, service contract acts fall sort of under the prevailing wage umbrella, so you still need to think prevailing wage when you see a service contract act, but it's not necessarily related to construction or building. It would be more like, as an example, if you had a security crew working for this government building, they would be considered, they would be paid prevailing wage. But again, not necessarily related to construction. But going back to that, when we are talking about construction and who prevailing wage applies to, would be laborers and mechanics who are doing the work physically in nature on those qualifying projects on the actual job site. Now, it does not apply to office staff, and it generally doesn't apply to owners, but we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But it really applies to those who are doing the work physically in nature at the job site. Now, there's a few things that are unique about Washington, just to touch on. If you have a manager or a supervisor who is at the job site doing the physical work, and they are doing less than 20% of their work week, hours spent in their work week, less than 20%, they do not need to be paid prevailing wage. If they are doing 20 to 50% of their work week hours doing prevailing wage work on that job, the physical job, they do need to be paid prevailing wage. If it's more than 50%, they need to be paid prevailing wage for the whole week, even if it's 60% prevailing wage work at the job site and 40% is their managerial duties. They still get paid prevailing wage for the entire week. And then another unique thing to add about Washington is if an owner, I say it doesn't generally apply to owners, but in this case where Washington is unique, if an owner is working on the job site and that owner has less than 30% ownership, they do get paid prevailing wage. If they have more than 30% ownership in the company, they do not. So yeah, just those two things, again, like I said, unique to Washington, but something to keep in mind, especially when you have your managers or supervisors stepping in to do physical work on the job. So talk a little bit about wage determination. So wage determination is where you will find the set rates that you're required to pay your employees. I mentioned before that these wages can vary based on classes, work classes, and geographic location, excuse me. So as far as where to find them, I've got a link up here. It might be a little bit too small for everybody to see, but you can write this down, or we can make sure that you have this link toward the end of the seminar today. This is for Washington, and then sam.gov is where you will go to find the federal rates as well. The question that we hear a lot is, how are these rates determined? And they are largely based on union rates. So these rates, prevailing wage rates should resemble union wages as well. And this slide says once assigned, it stays in effect for the duration of the project, which is usually the case, and it should be noted in the contract from your awarding agency. And if it's not, as a contractor, you need to go annually and check to make sure that if there are not changes to the wage, that's great. But if there are, you need to pay your employees accordingly. So just looking at an example of a wage determination sheet, this is a wage determination sheet for Washington for a federal job. So a few things to note, there's usually an issue date, and again, these do get updated annually, I believe in July. Is that right? I think so. You'll also see the locality and the craft. And sometimes you'll see a few different locations listed, a few different crafts, but you definitely want to make sure you're following the specific craft and location. So we're going to look here at this wage determination sheet. We've got a carpenter in Longview, and you've got the base wage of $43.80. And then you've got the fringes listed out as $18.56. Some wage determination sheets can look a little bit different where they say fringe benefits or employer payments, but it's all the same. It is the fringe. Now, the fringe has to be paid in cash wages, benefits, or a combination of both. And there are incentives to using these fringe dollars for benefits. It's going to greatly reduce your labor costs. But if you're going to do that, there are 4 legal uses of fringe for benefits, which we'll get into here in just a minute. But before we do that, I want to take another look at a wage determination sheet in Washington, and this is for the state. So it looks a little bit different. And this is another thing that's unique about Washington. I think there's one other state that does this way, but for Washington, they don't break out the base and the fringe. And it's up to the employer, the contractor, to decide what that fringe looks like or what that fringe amount is going to be. So it could be $5, $10, $15, $20, but it's up to the contractor to make that decision. So again, looking at this, you've got an electrician in Spokane. So this is how this will look for wage determination sheets in the state of Washington for city, state, or county projects. So I mentioned before that fringe benefits have to be paid out in a combination of cash wages and or benefits. If you're going to pay these fringe dollars out through benefits, they need to be set up through a bona fide fringe benefit for those covered employees, meaning they need to be set up through a third-party trustee. So if you look at the definition here under fringe benefits, it says, under the Davis-Bacon Act, the terms wages, scaled wages, wage rates, and prevailing wages include the base hourly rate of pay and any contribution made to a trustee or third party pursuant to a bona fide fringe benefit fund, plan, or program. And then below, you can see it says a contract under methods. It says a contractor's prevailing wage obligation may be met by any combination of cash wages and credible bona fide fringe benefits provided for a covered worker. So in reading that, there are requirements that must be met when you're paying out fringe dollars through a benefits program, and at Beneco, all of our services do meet these requirements. So I'm going to just use the example PTO. So the PTO plan is one of the 4 legal uses of fringe dollars that can actually be set up where the contractor can put the fringe aside and fund the PTO plan themselves. But there are rules around this. If you're going to do this, you have to have the fringe set up in a separate account. You have to have a written plan document, and you have to have prior approval from the Department of Labor. And I don't know about anybody on this call or anybody in this room, but I certainly wouldn't want the Department of Labor in my business. I could avoid it. So I'm using this as the example because we do see this happen a lot where a contractor will just put the fringe into their account and then just pay it out as they see fit down the road. They know they're going to use it. But again, if they don't set up their vacation time this way or their PTO this way and get prior approval, they're out of compliance. So if the funds go through a third-party trustee, now the third-party trustee is going to assume the fiduciary responsibility of the record keeping and making sure the funds are going to the correct employee. The funds are irrevocable, so once they're set up for the benefit, they can't be taken back. And then handling the PTO this way keeps you in compliance and hopefully keeps the Department of Labor out of your business. Okay, so a few slides ago, I mentioned that there is an incentive regarding labor burden. So first, prevailing wage, as we discussed, is a combination of your base wage and your fringe benefits. When you pay those fringes in cash, that's going to increase your labor burden. So your labor burden is what you pay above and beyond the prevailing wage to cover your combination of payroll taxes, which are FICA, that's your federal payroll tax, FUTA and SUTA is your federal and state unemployment tax, workers' comp, and general liability. So, and breaking this down, we see with Beneco clients, it's usually about a 30% labor burden rate. FICA is 7.6%, FUTA and SUTA is about 2.3%. Workers' comp can be anywhere between 10 and 15% or higher, really, just depending on what you're doing. And then general liability is about 5%. So we go generally with about 30% on labor burden. But the reason we include workers' comp and general liability is because your workers' comp is specifically affected by your payroll. If your payroll increases, so does your workers' comp premium. And when you're doing these prevailing wage jobs, your payroll is going to increase greatly. So if you pay those fringes outside of payroll, you're going to reduce the amount you have to pay in payroll taxes, and you're going to reduce the audit that you get each year for your workers' compensation. Does that make sense? So we're going to talk a little bit about offering fringe versus paying cash. So I want to talk about the advantages of using fringe for benefits versus cash, and we're going to just break it down here in this mathematical equation. So you can see here at the top with this first scenario, the base wage is $40 and the fringe benefit is $25. So you got a total of $65. You add on that 30% labor burden rate, you've got $84.50. So that is the cost to pay your employees the base and the fringe. If you look at the example at the bottom, you've got a $40 base wage. We're going to add labor burden to that $40 only because you're paying the fringe to a bona fide trust. So you've got your base wage, you've got at $40, you've got your labor burden, 30%, which brings you to $52. Add on the $25 fringe that's going to the bona fide trust, and now your total cost is $77. So by removing those fringes from payroll, you're now saving $7.50 per hour per employee for doing this prevailing wage work. Does that all make sense, that math? I'm not good at math, so if you raised your hand, I wouldn't be offended. Okay, so we're going to talk about how this looks from a bigger picture. The employer is saving $7.50 per employee per hour. So if you have an employee who does 50% prevailing wage work annually, so 1,040 hours, that's a savings of $7,800 per year. And then our average client has about 25 field employees. So times that 25 field employees, you've now got $195,000 in savings and labor costs that you would have paid toward taxes and insurance. And I think it's safe to say that everybody on this call and everybody in this room would rather spend $200,000 on things besides taxes and insurance. First and foremost, the contractors we talk to that work with us, they take this labor burden savings and they roll it into their bids to be able to bid more competitively. And I know Jason's had a lot of experience with this, and myself included, where we talk to contractors who are bidding and they're not winning these bids and they cannot figure out why. I mean, they're down to the penny and are so frustrated because the guy up the street is winning the bid. And when we explain this to them, it makes sense. They have this light bulb moment, like, okay, I get it. This is how they're doing this. They're rolling the labor burden savings in, and they're able to outbid me. And then beyond that, this kind of savings you can use for, new equipment, a couple new vehicles for your fleet, or maybe you have, office staff or employees who aren't doing prevailing wage work that maybe you'd like to reward with a bump in pay. And this is just 50% prevailing wage work. This is half of the year. So, if you're doubling this, it's nearly $400,000 that you'd be saving in labor burden. Now, something that we hear a lot is that employers don't offer benefits because it's expensive, and it is expensive. But looking at the same math here, only we're going to take the fringe, which is $25 per employee per hour. We're going to times it by, again, that 50% prevailing wage, 1,040 hours. That's $26,000 per year per employee. And then times that by your 25 field employees, you've got $650,000 that you can use for benefits for your employees. As the contractor or employer, when you won this bid, the state awarded you this money to provide benefits for your employees. Now, we always want to bring up the elephant in the room, and that is usually, it's a conversation we have often, is how do I tell my employees that I am taking $20, $25, $15, whatever it may be, out of their per hour away from them to put towards benefits. And there's something that we call wage roller coaster, where you might be doing prevailing wage 25% of the year, and the wage for your employees is up and down. There's really no set, it's not a stable rate. And so this is one way of looking at it, and a really great way to explain to your employees how this all works. So just kind of show you just an example of what this would look like annually. So the top line, if you look at Q1, if they're making $30 per hour on a private job for 3 quarters out of the year. So quarter 1, they're making $30 an hour. Quarter 2, they've got $60 an hour. They're loving it. Maybe they go out and overspend because they're happy to have double the pay, right? And then Q3, $30 an hour. Q4, $30 an hour. That's $78,000 annually they're making. Now, it happens over time. It's not going to happen immediately, but say you decide you're going to remove that fringe, put it toward a benefit or bona fide trust. Now and you've grown the business, and you're at 75% annually prevailing wage work. So you've gone from 25 to 75% because you've been able to bid more competitively using that labor burden savings. So now, if you're doing prevailing wage 3 quarters out of the year, and that fringe is going to benefits, their base rate is $40 per hour. So quarter 1 is $40 an hour. 42, they're making $40 an hour. Quarter 3 is maybe their private work, the private job, and then Q4 is they're back to $40 because they're doing prevailing wage work. Comes out to be the same, $78,000. But now they have a retirement account that is growing significantly. They might have medical benefits. They might be able to pay. They're taking paid time off. And then if the contractor decides that they want to even grow their business more, increase their prevailing wage work even more to 100%, to do annually all year, you're doing straight prevailing wage. Now you're giving them a pay increase. So there's a few reasons why we emphasize this. It provides job security. There's not so much influx. It's steady income. And I think that's what most employees would probably prefer. So anyway, do you want to take a quick break? Do you guys need a quick break at all? Are we good? If we just keep rolling? Okay, perfect. So we're going to get into medical, 401k, certified payroll, and Secure 2.0. And I'm actually going to let Jason kind of step in for that.
Thanks a lot, Jenny. Thanks a lot, everybody, for joining us today. It was a very good example that we just gave to the point Jenny was making of what we're discussing today, and some strategies and policies to keep you guys compliant on these projects, but also significantly increase your bidding power, ways to save money, but then looking also at the impact that's going to have on the employees. One thing that I think just about everybody we talk to, one of the struggles that they're having in this environment is keeping employees, having enough good employees, keeping fully staffed. And Jenny showed us the chart showing all of the projects that are out there from the infrastructure bill, some other bills that have passed recently. The Inflation Reduction Act has some prevailing wage aspects to it too. But it's trying to find enough employees to fill the need for these jobs. So a big part of what we do is providing some education for the employees as well, and what these benefits programs can do for them and mean for them long term. Set them up for being able to retire someday, have a good health program in place. And while initially sometimes they can have some hesitancy with, the employees would rather initially have the higher pay. Once we explain how the benefits programs work and how that can benefit them, it actually does improve employee retention. And once they're able to utilize these benefits, see their 401k plan growing, it does help employees retain, or companies attract and retain their employees, which is really good and a big point in this current market. So what we're going to get into next is reducing the cost of benefits. So we covered at a pretty good level of how we can save the company significant cost in their labor. So when they're bidding their projects, their hourly labor costs have been decreased. Now, on top of that, all of the money that Jenny mentioned that's basically been awarded to the company to then be used to pay for benefits for their employees can also, additional savings, reduce the cost of your benefits programs. So you can utilize this prevailing wage money, these fringe dollars from these projects, to pay the employer's cost of the health insurance plan for those employees. They can use that money to pay their employees for their PTO. They can use it to fund an HRA program, which is something employees really appreciate. We'll get into some of those details. Then also use it to reduce the cost of your 401k plan. So it can make all of those benefits cheaper to offer. So that's additional savings on top of the labor cost. So some examples from for health insurance or health and welfare plans that you can pay for with these prevailing wage dollars is your standard, your major medical health plans, dental, vision, life, disability, any of those insurance products you can pay for with prevailing wage dollars. Another program that you can utilize is called Hour Banking, where really what we're looking at here is how many in the audience today have some seasonality in your business, to where there's some months, maybe during the summer, where your employees are working excess hours. And then in the winter months, there might be times where things are slowing down. Maybe you have layoffs for a month of the year, or less work in slow periods. You can actually take dollars, prevailing wage funds, for months where you've worked extra hours, and use those to bank some of the funds to pay for health insurance premiums in later months, when maybe you're not working, when things are slower. So it's a way to kind of spread out some of the funds available from the busy time of year to other times of the year. Now, I mentioned the HRA program, which is something that employees really appreciate, because it's a benefit that they can use today, and it's something that can really help them out in a pinch. But you can take some of this prevailing wage money and put it onto what's basically like a medical debit card for your employees. So all the tax savings that Jenny was talking about, the company realizes all those tax savings by taking some of that prevailing wage money off of payroll and putting it onto a medical debit card for your employees. Your employees then have tax-free money that they have, or tax-free funds on this account that can be used to pay for medical expenses. These can be used for any of the approved IRS medical expenses. So you're thinking co-pays, deductibles, prescriptions, dental treatment, eyeglasses, medical premiums. On top of that, some cases that we just realized here recently, but can even be used to reimburse some travel expenses if you have to travel over 100 miles to see a specialist for something. So anything that's approved from the IRS for medical expenses, your employees could use this card for. And one of the reasons why the employees really appreciate this as a benefit, and part of the conversation with some of their hourly pay that was going to them on their paycheck is now going into these benefits programs. Well, this is something that they can have, that they can use here and now. It's not just for retirement, but it's tax-free money for that employee to pay for unexpected medical expenses. The example that we always give is the tax-free portion. If an employee has a surprise $1,000 dental bill, it costs the employee has to earn $1,400 to have $1,000 after taxes to pay that surprise dental bill. Where conversely, with this plan, it's tax-free money for the employee as well. So $1,000 of Fringe did not go through payroll, went on this account. That employee has $1,000 to pay for that dental bill. Some added benefits there. The reason why the employees like it is that just the way the world works. These surprise medical bills never come up in your busy time of year when your employees are working extra hours. it's going to happen, maybe at Christmas time where there's other expenses, or where you've had a couple slow weeks where the employees got less hours. They have this in their pocket that they know that if anything comes up, and it'll cover costs for their dependent spouse if they're on their plan, that they can pay for those without having to worry about also being able to pay their other bills. The account balance on this, be some confusion sometimes between HSAs, HRAs, and FSAs. But the way this program works is it carries over year to year. There's no use it or lose it component. So the employee can have that balance can carry over to use in future years. And even if they terminate employment, if they leave your company, per prevailing wage benefit regulations, they take that with them. So they still have this card to use until the funds are exhausted. So those are funds they'll always have access to. Now, a vacation or PTO plan, Jenny touched on this on an example earlier, but you can use some of the prevailing wage money to cover the cost of a PTO plan. Now, in Washington, you're not able to use the prevailing wage money to cover the state mandated sick time, but you can if you want to offer your employees an additional week of paid time off work, something like that. You can do that. Now, the way the standard prevailing wage regulation states is that those funds need to be held with a third-party trustee that takes on that fiduciary responsibility, which is where Beneco would come in, where we can manage this account for you. Those dollars are sent to Beneco and held in a third-party trust to then pay your employees when they take time off work. Like Jenny said, you do have the option with this to have what they call as an unfunded plan, where the company would keep those dollars themselves and not use a third party. But there are strict guidelines for how those are set up. Number one, where you do have to have the Department of Labor's approval in advance. It needs to be held in a separate bank account. So it can't be just in your general account. It needs to be in a separate account specifically for PTO. You have to have it has to be in a written policy and legally enforceable from that policy. And then also the term is that it needs to be managed financially responsible. So those are kind of the criteria you need to meet if you're doing this on your own, as well as the Department of Labor approval, versus be a lot easier just have a third party take care of that for you and avoid those extra hurdles, if you will. Another benefits program that, depending on your circumstance, could be really useful as a way to utilize some of this prevailing wage money is a supplemental unemployment benefits plan. So where this is going to make sense would be